introduced and mentored already at the very young age by Gustav Mahler. Richard Strauss, for example, said that we are all poor against this child.
For us pianists, these are the works that everybody wants to play, but require a particular level of maturity, spiritual maturity, as well as obviously technical control of your instrument and the knowledge of.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of What's on Vienna,
your immersive guide in the sometimes overwhelming world of the classical music and arts events in the city.
Today we are going to talk about the highlights, about our personal highlights of the second part of May. And I would like to start with one particular program that is going to be performed 2 times at Vienna Concerthaus by Vienna Symphony Orchestra with the conductor Peter Popelka. Next to the pieces by Beethoven, Joseph Strauss, Richard Strauss, you are going to hear a violin concerto by Erich Korngold, performed by wonderful violinist Renaud Capuçon. Erich Korngold is a very interesting figure in the classical music world, born on the edge of the 20th century in Brno. He was a kind of a child prodigy, introduced and mentored already at the very young age by Gustav Mahler. Richard Strauss, for example, said that we are all poor against this child. His ballet was performed when he was 13 years old at the Vienna Court Opera, today's Vienna State Opera House. And later on, a lot of his music was performed by the most prominent musicians of the time and conductors. But in the early 30s, when anti-Semitism started to rise in Germany and Austria, he went to the States and he promised not to compose anything for the concert hall and concentrate until Hitler was going to be defeated. So he focused on the film music, and he really contributed a lot to Hollywood movie industry. Received 2 Oscars, I think few Oscar nominations, and just after the end of the Second World War, he returned to the kind of music he actually composed in the very beginning and always wanted to create. And the violin concerto was one of the first of such creations. It was premiered in the States by Heifetz, but in Vienna it was premiered by Vienna Symphony Orchestra. And Renaud Capuçon is really wonderful violinist, and I think that one of the things that distinguish him from other soloists is his very well-rounded music education, in contrast to those cases when violinists in their formative years focused mostly on the solo repertoire, doing competitions. He was performing and exposed to a lot of chamber music repertoire, symphonic repertoire, leading the orchestra with wonderful conductors at the very young age. And of course it's not unique. Many soloists have this kind of upbringing, but still not often enough. And I think you can really hear that, and I really like his way of playing and his artistry, which is one incident was a bit funny a few years ago when I went to listen to Rosenkavalier by Strauss at the Vienna State Opera, and I'm always checking the musicians of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, which performs at the State Opera House. And I'm looking who is playing today, who is the concertmeister, always curious. Sometimes you cannot really see because it's dark, sometimes it's a bit far. And that evening I was looking, and I saw somebody looked really similar to Renaud Capuçon. And I was, no, it's not really possible, because it's very uncommon that such soloist would perform in the orchestra. And somehow, after all, I decided, no, it was not him. And he's very known for his admiration, a very special love for music of Richard Strauss. And then next day, I think I saw on Facebook that actually it was him. And if I'm not mistaken, he was on the tour, or he had some concert in Vienna with Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. And then I guess he asked to join the orchestra in the evening, which is, I think, very, very cool and very special. But you heard him relatively recent, right? I was not there at that concert.
I have a feeling that I've heard him live a couple of times, but I don't remember exactly which was the last time. I feel that I've heard him also in chamber music as well as a soloist. And I think what you're saying is true, that he is a very well educated musician, but he's also not very uber intellectualized in his performances. I think what comes across is that he's very warm and emotional in a very good way. So I remember what I've heard him playing live was very touching and lovely, and he makes this really natural, pleasant connection with the audience. But I also remember his videos from his home, the daily lives during the pandemic, during the lockdown, and he would perform for an hour, I think, right, with the playback. And
I don't remember.
It was so cute, and I remember it was really uplifting, and I would listen to that, I think, almost every day, because there were a lot of online events, as you all remember. And this was one of the things that really stood out to me. First of all, the quality of his playing was exceptional, and he would play short pieces, very varied, very light, beautiful program, very often. And it was really bringing joy. So when I think of Renaud Capuçon, I really think about someone who's very kind and positive and nice. I don't know. That's just the impression I have of him.
Yeah, so it's. I think it's going to be a very, very nice concert, and please check it out.
And my next introduction is a little bit connected to what you were saying with Korngold, kind of, because the connection between Austrian operetta and Hollywood music, but also the Broadway musicals, is very strong due to the exact events that you described, because a lot of the composers were forced to flee Austria, which was obviously a huge tragedy in itself, but it really contributed to the musical culture of the States, of the more lighter, more popular genres. There is probably very few musicals as well known as The Sound of Music in the States. However, when you come to Austria, I don't know if the situation is still the same. People are very happy to point out that Austrians are not familiar with that movie or the play, right? Because they're just very proud to say that. Although if you go to Salzburg, I believe that there are like special guided tours of the area and whatnot. Of course, The Sound of Music was one of the movies I adored as a child, and I started learning English with a teacher who loved introducing songs to us. So we would actually sing a lot from The Sound of Music, and I absolutely adored it. Now, why am I talking about Sound of Music? You might have guessed. In Volksoper, on the 29th of May, you have a possibility to listen to The Sound of Music in German, with English subtitles. I think that's really fun. I don't know. I would really like to listen to that. And I don't know who doesn't like The Sound of Music. That's a good
I guess there are people who are neutral.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, neutral, exactly, but don't like, So for me, it's a very sentimental movie and work, I'm sure, as for many, many, many other people. But it might be really fun to hear it in German. So in case you have time, Volksoper with English subtitles will be doing The Sound of Music on the 29th of May.
Very nice, very nice. And on the 27th and 28th of May, London Symphony Orchestra is coming to Vienna with two different programs, two evenings, one after another, with 2 different programs, with Antonio Pappano and fantastic violinist Lisa Batiashvili. The program, they're going to perform Berlioz, also Symphony Fantastique, Strauss, Heldenleben, Strauss Opus 28, 2 different violin concertos. It's quite unusual. One evening is Szymanowski violin concerto, and the other one is Mozart concerto number 5.
Nice.
Yes, very, very nice. And Szymanowski concerto is just a fantastic piece by prominent, of course, very famous Polish composer. Interesting that he actually was born in Ukraine, relatively close to Kiev, and actually spent his youth there until 18, 19 years old. So has a lot of connection there. Lisa Batiashvili is just fantastic. I adore her. Interesting that, not very interesting, but it's curious that in my late teenage years, although I respected her a lot, of course, as a violinist, I didn't really find a true connection to her playing. I guess it seemed a bit... at that time for me a bit maybe cold or not personal enough, but I guess I had to mature myself a bit in order to hear and understand what she's doing, how she is serving the music, and what she does with violin, and it just changed with the time. And also, beside adoring her as a musician, I think she's a very interesting, wonderful person who is very vocal also about her political views. We touched this topic a few episodes ago when we discussed culture and politics. And she was always like that. I listened to her earlier interviews, in her 20s. At that time, it was not at all usual for musicians to talk about this. And already at such young age, she was very strong, and she always talks a lot about Georgia and all the dangers. And it's really, really very important.
I think for all of us Georgians, especially Georgian musicians, Lisa Batiashvili is someone everybody admires. But she's definitely a very well-rounded person.
Oh, yeah.
And in absolutely every aspect of her activity, she is definitely someone I could consider a role model as a musician, as a performer, as a citizen, as a woman. I don't know, just absolutely every aspect of her is evoking admiration and infinite respect. And you are very correct. She is very intellectual. She has very well thought, big ideas, important ideas, that she is using her position of privilege wonderfully to raise awareness about things that are to be talked about, very dangerous themes. She has been a supporter of Ukraine from before day one of the invasion, and has tried her best to do really big projects and really a lot, I think, not only some of it but maybe most of it behind closed doors, as probably should be done. And so this in parallel to having a world career and being a wonderful mother and wife and so on can only be admired. And you are right, it is to me personally a little bit not disappointing but not very appealing. Honestly, of course, I understand the reasons for that. When people come to a certain city with the same orchestra and repeat the same program one night after the other, of course, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and we understand that there are limitations with time of rehearsal with orchestra and many other reasons why you might want to program that.
A lot of people want to attend the concert, and sometimes just one concert is not enough to fulfill this wish.
But of course, as a musician myself, I admire people who can bring two completely different programs, and it makes you obviously want to go to both concerts. So I really really like that and enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm very excited about those concerts.
And moving on, I guess my introductions did not go in chronological order, but in order of their somehow weight and importance. This is another Georgian-born musician who is now an Austrian citizen. The legendary pianist Lisa or Elisabeth Leonskaja will be playing on the 25th of May in Concerthaus the 3 last sonatas of Beethoven. Lisa, of course, is yet another musician that we as Georgians admire, that I grew up admiring. Some of the most important, impressive and inspiring memories of my childhood are from her concerts. I remember I was already a little bit older teenager when I listened to her old Schubert program with Wanderer Fantasy and Last Piano Sonata. It was an absolutely unforgettable concert. Really, like every note of it was something I will remember, I think, till the end of my life. And I've heard her since then numerous times, of course. And I think that her interpretation of Schubert particularly, but also Viennese repertoire is remarkable. And I've heard her live from very near distance, and we've had the privilege of meeting her. So it's just a very big name, very big legend, absolutely rightfully well deserved. So now the Beethoven last 3 sonatas are a piece, each one of them individually are such profound pieces that not only you could, but people do write dissertations and books and essays about and dedicate their whole careers to studying. I will not bore you with
bore us.
any of that.
Interesting.
But for us pianists, these are the works that everybody wants to play, but require a particular level of maturity, spiritual maturity, as well as obviously technical control of your instrument and the knowledge of Beethoven and the time period and everything. But you have to also really be a grown-up person. So these are the pieces that are probably best played after 50, I would say, although we all try to play them much earlier and we strive and we work on them for decades, which is a wonderful thing. But these are the pieces that are the last of Beethoven's work for piano, although these are definitely not his last opuses. And there are many quotes of him talking about this. And basically, when he wrote these sonatas, he was completely done not only with the genre, but with the piano itself. Like he had really finished kind of the instrument, like he was done with it. And these sonatas are absolutely everything for piano repertoire. And as compositions, they are both extremely progressive and introduce very new ideas, and at the same time, very much so looking back at Baroque forms, at Baroque lightness, Baroque composers, whilst introducing harmonic ideas and form ideas that are to come later. And it's difficult to say which one of these sonatas is more splendid than the other. They are quite different. And my personal favorite is probably the last one. And it's always a fascinating thing to listen to great pianists of our time or past, or there's just numerous recordings, and compare how much possibility these pieces give to each performer to really show their individuality. I'm talking about people who are, of course, absolute masters of the instrument and have immense knowledge and, of course, respect to the text. So within the text, within being very strict with Beethoven's text, you can absolutely blossom and say a lot. Of course, granted that you have a lot to say, which, of course, Elisabeth Leonskaja does have. I have to say that I heard her play the very last Opus 111 Sonata 2 years ago live. It was very nice. But as a set, these sonatas really produce a completely different impression. So for all of you who really like piano music, really like the absolute music and the piano sonata, genre at its highest. Probably Beethoven was not wrong in saying that he kind of almost completed the genre. Of course, they are composers who composed piano sonatas after, but this is really an incredible height that he achieved in this genre. So for all of people who really would appreciate that, I really strongly recommend this concert on the 25th of May.
Very nice, very nice. And of course it's very special to experience these pieces all together and with other people.
Yes.
Live, although there are of course a lot of great recordings, but this is always very special.
True. And of course Viennese audience is people who will be attending this concert. Most of them are going to obviously know the pieces very well, but she also has a very big fan following, fan base. So the atmosphere will be very warm, very welcoming, enthusiastic, but also with high expectations, which is quite rare. So I will be definitely going. So maybe I'll see some of you there at this concert.
And I remember talking about the audience that when you listen to her Schubert sonatas, people were coming with the scores, right? With the
yes,
of
very
music,
many people, and I had wonderful tickets on stage. So I was sitting very close to her, and I could really see her work, and just from a very close distance. And everybody was so involved and engaged, but in a very beautiful and welcoming energy. And then as the concert finished, a lot of us took the same metro line back, and you could also take the train together with the same people who were very, very impressed. It was a fantastic concert, and it was just one of those beautiful evenings.
Important to say that public transportation in Vienna is very, very good, and actually not so crowded, especially at the time before concert and after. And very often at this time you can see audience going to State Opera House, and it's not an unusual.
And you do recognize the faces,
of course,
right? After, so you take
and
trains
you know
together.
that like there is this crowd coming, well dressed, that probably Musikverein, Konzerthaus or State Opera House. Yeah, it's always very cute and very cute.
Yes.
That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching and listening if you are on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. And yes, see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.